Hello there and welcome to the Bicycle Diaries and welcome to week 22 of my Mallorca training plan. Now, one of the reasons why I personally keep a training diary is not just to record the rides that I've done, but it's to hopefully be able to look back and see some sort of improvement. And that's precisely what we're going to do now, seeing as we're about roughly halfway through the year. If you're anything like me, your fitness goes in cycles. Basically, in the summer I become a Chiselled Adonis, and then as the year marches on and the weather deteriorates, I cycle less and less. That fitness starts to fade away, and then we get to Christmas and I eat, drink and make very merry, and basically in January my fitness is back to square one and I'm a sack of custard again. Now, this isn't anything unusual. This is basically the pattern that my fitness has followed for the last 30 years or so. Unfortunately, when you find yourself back at square one, the only thing you can do is get yourself back on the bike and try and gain some more fitness back. And that's precisely what I did by trying to establish my fitness base. So 1,500 kilometers of cycling and approximately 65 hours of seat time. Now, the weather here in the UK at that time of the year is not going to be great. It's going to be cold, so approximately 3 or 4 degrees Celsius, and inevitably it will be quite wet. So a lot of my cycling back then was done indoors using things like Zwift and Kinomat. But I did manage to get out on the road, but unfortunately for me, my very first road ride of the year, I had some mechanicals with the gears, so that cheered me up no end. And then on the 18th of January, I did my very first ride of the year on the Buns Bent and Hoe course. And I did that in 1 hour 31 minutes, and my average power was 117 watts. Now, I do appreciate that the average watts figure that I'm quoting is a calculation by Strava, as I don't have a power sensor myself, but for the purposes of this reflection, that should be perfectly fine. I don't mind admitting that I found that very first ride of the year on the Buns Bent and Hoe route a bit of a slog. Basically, there are 2 fairly long climbs on there, and when I was going up them, I could see that my heart rate was getting quite high. So essentially, I was going from aerobic to anaerobic exercise, and I really wanted to keep it in the anaerobic zone. So I decided to swap to what I called my Goldilocks route, which had some climbs in there, but I was still able to keep myself within the aerobic zone for a considerable amount of time, and that is basically what I needed at that time of year. For the next couple of weeks, I just chipped away at the base miles and continued with rides on those Goldilocks routes. And then at the beginning of March, I did my first really long ride at 53 kilometers. On that particular day, I rode up Beacon Hill and Old Winchester Hill, and both of them are pretty long climbs. And again, I don't mind admitting that I was pretty tired by the time I got back. And then on the 13th of March, James from Cardio Sport and I went off into the Sussex countryside and rode up Bevis's Thumb and Harting Hill. And when we got back, I'd ridden the longest ride of the year yet again at 63 kilometers. My average power for that ride was 135 watts, and I felt reasonably okay when I finished it, which surprised me a little because the ride I did up Old Winchester Hill a few days before was shorter, but I felt far more tired when I finished that. A couple of weeks later, the UK went into lockdown due to coronavirus, which meant that I was only officially allowed out of the house for 1 exercise session a day. Now, this wasn't necessarily a bad thing because that also meant fewer cars on the road, and fewer cars on the road meant better road safety and improved air quality. Add to that the weather was getting better, plus all of my regular day job camera bookings had gone away, so I was more or less self-unemployed with loads of time to ride the bike. Essentially, all of these factors came together and proved the perfect conditions for cycling. My strategy at this time was fairly simple, so I just wanted to continue chipping away at the base miles, building up my general fitness and focusing on my on-the-bike endurance. By the end of April, I had completed my base miles and I decided to go out and give myself a bit of a fitness test by riding up the Edney's Lane course. Now this is 25 kilometres long and it's got quite a challenging climb on there, and normally I try and do door to door in under an hour, and on that particular day I managed that quite easily with an average power of 189 watts. On the 6th of May, I went out and did another longest ride of the year to date by cycling to Bognor and back. Now that was 70 kilometres, and although it was relatively flat and I had a bit of a tailwind coming home, by the time I got back, I don't mind admitting that I was extremely tired and not really looking forward to doing the next long ride. But having said that, I went out and did the same ride about 10 days later and felt perfectly fine. Towards the end of May, I began experimenting with some minor changes to my position on the trek. Essentially, I moved the saddle forward a little bit and then readjusted the position of the cleats. And to my surprise, this had an extraordinary effect on my cycling. When I tested myself on the Edney's Lane route, to my surprise, I got a PR going up the main climb, which is extraordinary when you consider how many years I've been riding that route. I managed to complete the route in 55 minutes, which is the fastest I've ever ridden it. Plus, my average power was 210 watts, which was also the highest it's ever been. Shortly afterwards, I achieved the longest week on the bike for the year so far at 251 kilometres, and then I also managed to get a PR on the long-standing segment up Bevis's Thumb, beating the one that I set in 2015 by 20 seconds. From here on in, my speed and my strength just seemed to be improving. On the 8th of June, I decided to test myself again on the Southwark course. Now that's 27 kilometres long and it has two fairly challenging climbs on there, and my strategy is to try and ride the entire thing in under an hour. And up until that date, I hadn't quite managed it, but when I did it on that day, I did the whole route in 59 minutes with an average power of 207 watts, and I felt pretty good by the end of it. And then on Saturday I went out and tested myself on the Buns Benton Hoe route, and long story short, I didn't get any significant PRs on any of the individual segments, but I did complete the 30 kilometre route in the fastest time I've ever done, of 1 hour and 8 minutes with an average power of 212 watts. So this is actually rather convenient because I can now compare this ride with the day that I rode the same route for the first time this year. So back in January I rode it in 1 hour 31 minutes with an average power of 117 watts, and you don't have to be a Stephen Hawking's maths genius to work out that that's considerably faster with almost double the power. If we go over and have a look at the numbers, we can see that this week I've ridden 98 kilometres, I've accumulated 3 hours and 44 minutes of seat time, and I've climbed 662 metres, and that brings the totals for the year to 2,545 kilometres, 111 hours and 15 minutes of seat time, and I've climbed 16,032 metres. So to put that into some sort of perspective, distance-wise, that's like riding from here in Hampshire to the middle of the Sahara Desert, and climbing-wise, it's like riding up Everest twice. Unfortunately, that doesn't appear to be reflected in the Strava fitness scores, because on Tuesday it was 59, on Wednesday it was 58, and then on Saturday it was 57. Unfortunately, the weather forecast for the next few days is not looking great. I feel I've been neglecting my endurance a little bit over the last couple of weeks, so hopefully I will manage to get out and do some longer rides, plus I'll be continuing with the shorter, faster rides. So there we go, that's a quick reflection on the last 6 months, and all in all I'm pretty pleased with how it's all gone. Although I am also looking forward to making further improvements to my strength, speed and stamina for when I go to Mallorca in 3.5 months' time. Thanks for watching.